The air in my sister's grand entrance hall was thick with the scent of expensive flowers and even more expensive perfume. It was a smell that used to mean family, celebration, love. Today, it just felt cold. My daughter, Lily, clutched my hand, her small fingers tight around mine, her eyes wide with the kind of awe only a 7-year-old can muster. She was wearing her favorite dress, the one with the little blue flowers we'd found together at a store she loved. She thought she looked like a princess. I thought she looked perfect. We walked towards the sound of laughter and clinking glasses, the noise of my sister Eleanor's legendary annual summer party spilling from the back garden. I adjusted the gift bag in my other hand, a carefully chosen toy for my nephew, and tried to quiet the nervous flutter in my stomach. Things with Eleanor had been strained, distant. But this was a family party. This was supposed to be a bridge. We found her holding court near a massive ice sculpture that was slowly melting into the shape of a swan. Eleanor looked, as always, like she'd just stepped off the pages of a magazine. Her dress was crisp, white, undoubtedly costing more than my monthly rent. Her smile was bright and wide, until it landed on us. It didn't fall, not exactly. It just chilled. It became a polite, social smile, the kind you give to acquaintances, not your sister and niece. "Oh, you made it," she said, her voice a cool melody over the party's din. She didn't move to hug us. Lily, ever the brave one, let go of my hand and took a small step forward, holding out the gift bag. "Auntie Ellie, this is for Charlie," she said, her little voice barely a whisper in the crowd. Eleanor took the bag with a manicured hand, glanced at it, and placed it on a nearby table without a second look. "How sweet," she said, her eyes already scanning the crowd behind me. Then she looked back at Lily. Her gaze traveled from my daughter's carefully braided hair, down the simple cotton dress, to her shiny, but clearly not designer, sandals. That's when her smile turned into something else. A smirk. A knowing, cruel little twist of her lips. She leaned in, not towards me, but towards Lily, as if sharing a secret. Her voice was low, sugary sweet, and it carried in that way only truly vicious words can. "You know, sweetheart," she cooed, "this party is for very special guests. There are delicate things here. Very expensive things." She patted Lily's head, a condescending tap. "There's just no room for your discount store kids here today." She said it so calmly, so matter-of-factly, as if stating the weather. The words hung in the air for a second, sharp and toxic. I saw them hit Lily before I even fully processed them myself. Her little face, so full of hope and excitement, just crumpled. The light in her eyes snuffed out, replaced by a welling confusion, then a deep, shuddering hurt. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. Then another. She didn't make a sound. She just turned on her heel, a sob catching in her throat, and ran. She ran back the way we came, past the laughing adults, past the glittering tables, her blue flower dress a blur of retreating misery. I stood frozen, rooted to the spot by a wave of pure, white-hot shock. I stared at my sister, my own flesh and blood. "Eleanor." I breathed, the word barely audible. She just looked back at me, that smirk still playing on her lips, a slight shrug in her perfectly tailored shoulders. "Really, Sarah, you should teach her about proper occasions. This isn't a backyard barbecue." And with that, she turned, her laughter ringing out falsely as she greeted a wealthy-looking couple, seamlessly absorbed back into her world of ice swans and calculated social moves. I stood there, utterly alone in a crowd of 100 people. The sounds of the party became a muffled, roaring noise in my ears. All I could see was the empty space where my daughter had been, and all I could feel was a betrayal so profound it stole the air from my lungs. This wasn't just an insult. This was a declaration of war, a line drawn in the sand of our shared history, and she had just pushed my child across it. The blind, furious instinct to chase after Lily propelled me forward. I didn't look back. I pushed through the crowd, my vision blurry with unshed tears of rage, following the path my broken little girl had taken. I found her in the car, curled up in the back seat, her face buried in her knees. Her small body shook with silent, heart-wrenching sobs. I climbed in, not into the driver's seat, but right next to her, gathering her into my arms. She clung to me, her tears soaking my shirt. She said I was a discount mommy. She hiccuped, the words fractured by grief. She said I didn't belong. I held her tighter, rocking her, whispering promises into her hair that everything was okay. But inside, a storm was raging. Everything was not okay. It would never be okay again. The memory of Eleanor's smirk was burned into my mind. The casual cruelty of it. The absolute betrayal. This was the sister who used to share a room with me, who I defended from bullies, who I'd loaned my favorite clothes to. This was the aunt who had once held Lily as a baby, cooing over her tiny fingers. Where had that person gone? Replaced by this cold, status-obsessed stranger who saw my child, my world, as a discount store embarrassment. The drive home was silent, heavy with a pain that was still too fresh to name. I tucked Lily into bed that night, her eyes red and puffy. She asked me a question that broke what was left of my heart. "Mommy, are we cheap?" I knelt by her bed, holding her face in my hands. "Listen to me, my love. You are priceless. You are worth more than every ice sculpture, every fancy dress, every single thing in that entire house. Your kindness, your heart, your smile, that is real wealth. Your Aunt Eleanor, she's forgotten what that looks like." She nodded, a small, trusting nod, and eventually drifted into a fitful sleep. I stayed there, watching her, and that's when the shock began to harden. It crystallized into something cold, sharp, and deliberate. Rage is a fire, but it burns out. What I felt now was a glacial resolve. This would not stand. My daughter's tears would not be the cost of entry into my sister's world. A plan began to form in the dark, quiet room. It wasn't about violence or screaming. It was about justice. It was about making Eleanor understand, in the only language she seemed to speak anymore, the true cost of her cruelty.
I didn't sleep that night.
I sat at my kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator my only companion, and I thought. I thought about our childhood. Our parents, who worked themselves to the bone to give us a modest, happy life. Eleanor had always been the one who wanted more. She married young, to a hedge fund manager named Richard, whose family money was old and deep. She'd ascended quickly into a world of country clubs and charity galas, and with each step up, she'd shed a piece of her old self, leaving our family and our past behind like last season's handbag. She looked down on my career as a graphic designer, my small but cozy home, my choice to prioritize Lily over networking events. I'd always brushed it off as sibling rivalry, as her own insecurities. But this was a direct attack on my child's spirit. This required a response. Not a petty argument, but a lesson. A revelation. I needed to expose the fragile, hollow foundation her perfect life was built upon. I needed her to feel, in her very soul, the exclusion and humiliation she had so freely dispensed. The first part of the plan was information. I needed to understand the world she was so desperate to protect. I started quietly. I reactivated long-dormant social media accounts, not to post, but to observe. I studied the pages of her wealthy friends, the charities she chaired, the interior designers and event planners she tagged. I noted the names, the brands, the unspoken rules. I remembered snippets of conversations she'd had over the years, complaints about rival socialites, fears about appearing nouveau riche, her obsession with an invitation to the exclusive Vanguard Arts Council annual gala, an invitation that had eluded her for 3 years running. That was her holy grail. That was the pinnacle of acceptance in her new world. A dark idea began to take shape. What if I could dangle that very invitation in front of her, only to show her how flimsy the ladder was she'd climbed? I used my skills. I spent nights designing, not client logos, but a replica of the Vanguard Council's branding. I studied their typography, their color schemes, their official language. I created a fake email address, a fake domain that was a near-perfect mirror of the real one. It was a digital ghost, convincing enough to pass a cursory glance. Then I crafted the email. It was a masterpiece of subtle flattery, and exclusivity. It was addressed to Eleanor, praising her recent philanthropic endeavors and influential social grace, and extending a special pre-invitation to the upcoming gala due to a last-minute cancellation on the board. The email instructed her to confirm her attendance via a dedicated, secure link, a link that led to a website I had built. The website was sleek, minimal, and asked for detailed information, dietary requirements, +1 details, and, most importantly, a philanthropic intent pledge, a non-binding statement of how she intended to support the council's causes in the coming year. It was a test of her vanity, her desperation, her entire value system. I sent the email on a Tuesday morning. I knew she checked her messages obsessively after her morning yoga. The waiting was agony. I refreshed my own dummy inbox, the one linked to the fake sender, every 5 minutes. Then, 3 hours and 17 minutes later, it appeared. A reply. From her. The subject line was simply, Vanguard Arts Council Gala, Invitation. My hand trembled as I clicked it. Her response was dripping with a syrupy, eager formality. To the esteemed members of the Vanguard Council, it began. I am profoundly honored and delighted to accept your gracious invitation. She went on for 3 paragraphs, detailing her long-standing admiration and her commitment to the cultivation of high art. She filled out every field on my fake website. She listed Richard as her +1. And in the philanthropic intent section, she pledged a sum of money that made my breath catch. It was an obscene amount, a life-changing amount for someone like me. For her, it was a ticket to the inner circle. She had taken the bait.
Completely.
Hook, line, and sinker. The first thrill of the plan working was immediately drowned by a deeper, colder satisfaction. She was so desperate for their validation that she hadn't even questioned it. She had walked right into the trap, blinded by her own ambition. But that was just the first move. I needed more. I needed to get inside her world physically. Using the details from her reply, I knew she would be shopping for a gown, booking beauty appointments, arranging everything for her big night. I called the most exclusive boutique in the city, the one she always mentioned. I pretended to be a harried personal assistant from the Vanguard Council's event coordination team. In my best polished, slightly bored voice, I explained that Mrs. Eleanor Thorne was to be given the Platinum Client Experience as a courtesy of the council. I asked them to prepare a selection of their most exquisite gowns for a private viewing and to send the bill directly to the council for final approval and processing. I gave them the date and time she'd likely visit, which I knew from her social media habits. The boutique manager was effusively grateful, promising the utmost discretion and service. I then called the high-end salon she used.
Same story.
A full day of beauty, hair, nails, makeup, all complimentary, courtesy of the Vanguard Council. I was building her fantasy, brick by expensive brick. I was making her believe she had finally arrived. The day of her private viewing arrived. From a cafe across the street from the boutique, hidden behind sunglasses and a magazine, I watched. I saw her arrive, a spring in her step I hadn't seen in years. She was greeted at the door by the manager herself, who ushered her inside with deep, respectful bows. Through the window, I could see her being presented with gowns, shimmering like liquid gemstones under the soft lights. She was smiling, laughing, touching the fabrics with reverence. She was in heaven. My sister, in the paradise I had constructed for her. The irony was so thick I could taste it, metallic and bitter on my tongue. She was spending money she thought she didn't have to pay, for an event that didn't exist, to please people who had no idea she was coming. The web of lies was growing, and she was the grateful, preening spider at the center of it, oblivious to the fact that the threads were not of her own making. Next, I targeted her social standing directly. I created another anonymous profile, this time on a private, members-only forum for the city's elite that I'd learned about through my research. Posing as a disgruntled former friend, I began to see doubts. Not loud accusations, but subtle, poisonous whispers. I commented on posts about charity fundraisers, mentioning how some newer members were all show, no substance, and how their pledged donations mysteriously failed to materialize. I never used Eleanor's name. I used descriptions only those in her circle would recognize. The one who always wears the white couture, the wife of the Thorn capital man, the one who lobbied so hard for the symphony board. The responses were telling. A few likes of agreement. A few private messages asking for more details, which I deftly avoided. I was tarnishing her reputation with the lightest, most untraceable brushstrokes. I was making the ground beneath her feet, the very social ground she prized above all else, feel just a little less solid. The final piece was the most delicate. I needed to involve Richard, her husband. He was the source of the money, the title, the entry into this world. From what I remembered, he was a proud, image-conscious man, but not unkind. He loved Eleanor, but he was also fiercely protective of his business and reputation. Using the fake Vanguard domain again, I sent an email. This one was addressed to him, CCing Eleanor. It was from the office of the council chairman. It was a formal, congratulatory note on Eleanor's upcoming induction into their social patron circle, and it delicately mentioned the philanthropic pledge she had submitted. It framed the pledge not as a demand, but as a demonstration of aligned values, a gateway to deeper influence. It was a professional, corporate shakedown, dressed in silk. I watched my inbox. Eleanor replied first, gushing with thanks. Richard's reply came an hour later. It was terse, professional, and copied to Eleanor. The pledge amount is noted. Thorn Capital looks forward to a fruitful association with the council. He had approved it. He was willing to pay that astronomical sum for social capital. The transaction was complete. Her value, in his world, now had a precise dollar figure attached to it. The very thing she had accused my daughter of being, a discounted item, was now her own official price tag, set by her own husband. The week of the fake gala arrived. The tension was a live wire inside me. I had sent the final instructions email. A limousine would pick them up at 8. They were to bring the pledge verification, a check made out to a shell charity name I'd created, and they would be greeted by a council ambassador. I hired a car service for 2 hours, using a chunk of my own savings. I gave the driver a photo of their house and instructions to simply drive around the city's most prestigious neighborhoods for the duration. I then stationed myself, hidden in the shadows of a building across from the Grand Museum that was the real Vanguard Gala's venue that night. At 8:15 I saw it. The long, black limousine gliding to a halt. The door opened, and out they stepped. Eleanor was a vision. A gown of silver and ice blue, hugging her figure, sparkling under the streetlights. Her hair was an intricate masterpiece, her jewelry glittering. She looked every inch the queen she believed herself to be. Richard stood beside her, tall and imposing in his tuxedo, a look of smug satisfaction on his face. They held themselves with an aura of triumphant arrival. They walked up the red-carpeted steps of the museum, towards the grand doors where real attendees in real finery were flowing inside. I saw Eleanor beam at a couple ahead of them, expecting recognition. The couple gave her a polite, distant smile and moved inside. A flicker of confusion crossed her face, but she smoothed it away. They reached the doors. A stern-looking man in a suit with a discreet headset stood there, a clipboard in hand. This was the real security. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the moment. Eleanor swept forward. Eleanor and Richard Thorn, she announced, her voice clear and confident. The guard scanned his clipboard. His brow furrowed. He scanned it again. He looked up at her.
I'm sorry, madam.
Your names aren't on the list. The words, though spoken politely, were like a physical blow. I saw Eleanor flinch. That's impossible, she said, her voice losing its smoothness. We have an invitation. A personal invitation from the council. Check again. Richard stepped forward, his authority radiating. There must be a mistake. Contact David Forrester, the chairman. He'll verify. The guard spoke quietly into his headset. We waited. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Eleanor's smile was frozen, a brittle mask. People behind them began to murmur, stepping around them. They were a blockage, an anomaly on the red carpet. The guard listened to his earpiece, then looked back at them, his expression now one of firm finality. "I'm very sorry, sir, madam. Mr. Forrester has no record of your invitation. You are not on the list. You'll have to step aside." The world stopped. I saw the color drain from Eleanor's face, leaving her expertly applied makeup stark against her skin. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Richard's face darkened with a mixture of fury and profound embarrassment. "This is outrageous," he hissed, low enough not to cause a bigger scene, but loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "We have the email. We have the confirmation." He fumbled for his phone, his hands uncharacteristically clumsy. He shoved the screen towards a guard, showing my carefully forged invitation. The guard barely glanced at it. "That is not an official Vanguard invitation, sir. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises, or I will call for assistance." The humiliation was complete. It was public, it was absolute, and it was unfolding in front of the very people whose opinion she valued more than anything. I saw her look around, catching the eyes of acquaintances who quickly averted their gazes, whispers already beginning.
She was exposed.
A fraud. A pretender. Exactly what she had always feared she was. The reality of it crashed over her, and her perfect posture sagged. Richard, seeing the gathering storm of scandal, grabbed her elbow, his grip undoubtedly tight. "Come on, Eleanor.
Now."
He pulled her, not gently, away from the doors, down the red-carpeted steps she had just ascended with such pride. Her steps were unsteady. She looked back once at the glowing entrance, at the world shutting its doors on her, and her expression was one of utter devastation. It was the mirror image of Lily's broken face running from her party. The circle was complete. They climbed back into the limousine, a silent, furious tomb on wheels. I watched it pull away, moving slowly, as if the vehicle itself was weighed down by their shame. I stood in the shadows for a long time, feeling the cold night air on my skin. There was no triumphant cheer, no surge of victory. Instead, there was a hollow emptiness, and beneath it, a deep, aching sadness. I had done it. I had served her a perfect plate of her own medicine. But the taste was ash. The fallout was swift and brutal, just as I designed it to be. The boutique and the salon, realizing their complimentary services would never be paid for by the Phantom Council, sent their invoices directly to Richard's office. He was livid, not just at the expense, but at the humiliation of being seen as a mark. The whispers I'd planted online found fertile ground. The story of their very public rejection at the Vanguard Gala spread through their social circle like wildfire. An exclusive is only fun when you're on the inside. When you're the one locked out, you become the joke. Invitations dried up. Her coveted position on the symphony board? A reevaluation of commitments saw her quietly removed. I heard all this in fragments, from our mother, who was confused and heartbroken by the sudden, cold silence between her daughters. I simply listened, saying nothing. 2 weeks after the gala, she showed up at my door. Not the Eleanor from the party, not the shimmering socialite. This woman was pale, dressed in simple jeans and a sweater, her eyes raw and red. She looked like my sister again, the one from before the money, and that almost broke me. "Sarah," she said, her voice ragged. "We need to talk." I let her in.
She didn't sit.
She stood in my modest living room, her eyes taking in the comfortable clutter, Lily's drawings on the fridge, the well-loved sofa. She saw the home she had once called quaint. Now, she just looked lost. "It was you," she stated flatly. It wasn't a question. I met her gaze. "Yes." She flinched as if I'd struck her.
"Why?
"Why would you destroy me like that?" The dam inside me finally burst. "Destroy you? Eleanor, you destroyed a 7-year-old's heart with a single sentence. You called my child, your niece, a discount store kid. You told her she didn't belong. I didn't destroy you. I simply held up a mirror. I showed you what it feels like to be told you're not good enough, to be publicly shamed and excluded from the club you'd sell your soul to join. You did that to yourself the moment you decided our love wasn't a luxury you could afford." The words hung between us. All the color left her face. She sank onto my sofa, as if her legs could no longer hold her. She put her face in her hands, and for the first time since we were children, I heard my sister truly sob. Great, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. "I'm sorry," she choked out, the words muffled. "Oh God, Sarah, I'm so sorry. What have I become?" "Richard, he's furious. The money, the embarrassment, he's talking about separation. My friends, they've all disappeared. I have nothing." I didn't go to comfort her.
Not yet.
The wound was still too fresh. "You have nothing?" I said quietly. "You had a sister who loved you. You had a niece who adored her Auntie Ellie. You had a family. You traded it all for a seat at a table that kicked you out the second you stumbled. Was it worth it? Were their smiles worth more than Lily's?" She looked up, her makeup streaked, her mask utterly gone. In her eyes, I saw genuine remorse, and behind it, a profound, terrifying emptiness. "No," she whispered. "It was hollow. All of it. It was just noise." I was so scared of being overlooked, of being that girl from the wrong side of town again, that I built a fortress. And I locked everyone who really loved me outside. She looked at Lily's drawing on the fridge, a stick-figure family with a big sun, all of us smiling. "Can you ever forgive me?" I took a deep breath. The anger was gone, leaving only a deep weariness and a flicker of pity. "Forgiveness isn't my gift to give," I said. "It's Lily's. And it will take time. A long time. But Eleanor, you can start by remembering who you were before you decided you needed to be someone else." The sister I knew would never have said those words. She left that day, not with a resolution, but with a beginning. A crack in the shell. The road back, if there is one, will be long and painful. She and Richard are in counseling. She stepped back from the social whirlwind. She started volunteering, real hands-on work at a community center, not just writing checks for galas. She sends Lily letters, simple, heartfelt apologies, with no expectations. Lily is cautious, her trust a fragile, broken thing that needs careful mending. Sometimes, when I tuck her in, she asks, "Is Auntie Ellie still mean?" And I tell her, "I think Auntie Ellie got very lost, honey. And she's trying to find her way back home." The revenge was perfect. It was cinematic. It exposed her, humbled her, and stripped her of everything she thought mattered. But the true justice wasn't in her downfall. It was in the painful, awkward, necessary lesson it forced upon us all. That the price of admission to any world that makes you deny your own family, that makes you cruel to a child, is always too high. That the most valuable things in life, love, loyalty, a child's trust, are never for sale, not at any store, discount or otherwise. And sometimes, the most devastating revenge is not destroying someone's life, but forcing them to finally, truly see their own.